Eric is the man behind AtlanteanConspiracy.com and the author of a big conspiracy encyclopedia by the same name, covering everything from Atlantis to Zion. He's also more recently finished a book and documentary pair, both entitled The Flat Earth Conspiracy. A guy that has definitely challenged my worldview, and that's not an easy thing these days, so let's dive into it. Eric, my man, welcome to THC.
Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
So happy to have you here, man, and I think a lot of people are going to be challenged with this one, and it is going to be tough to articulate some of these arguments without pictures and diagrams, but what I've seen has raised some serious red flags with a lot of things that we take as a given, everything from the existence of nuclear weapons in the International Space Station to the makeup of the Earth and the entire universe itself. So let's not beat around the bush, man. You know, to challenge the heliocentric model of the solar system is pretty blasphemous in today's world. So how do we start to unravel some of this stuff? What are some of the biggest red flags with our traditional understanding that should start putting those first cracks in the listener's preconceived notions?
Sure. Well, just our common sense everyday perception of the Earth, it is flat as far as we can tell. It is motionless as far as we can tell. And everything in the sky is revolving around us as far as we can tell. If nobody told us otherwise, we'd logically assume that the Earth was flat, motionless, with everything in the sky revolving around us. And you can prove that this is the case as well, for instance, with the horizon. As you rise up, no matter how high you go on the top of Mount Everest, or if you go in a balloon higher and higher, as far as 20 miles up and higher, we've gotten independent balloons have gone up with cameras. The horizon remains flat all the way around and rises to the eye of the camera all the way up. Now, if the Earth were a ball, no matter how big, the horizon is said to be the curvature of the ball. So as you rose up, the horizon would stay where it was, and you'd have to look down if you're in a hot air balloon, down further and further as you rose up and up, and the horizon would be below you. But in fact, as high as any non-NASA, RASA, or other Freemasonic space agency has ever shown us, as far as any independent camera has ever gone up, the independent rocket or balloon, as far as 20 miles up, totally flat and rises to the eye of the observer. So that's one proof. Of course, you can measure curvature if it actually existed. They say the ball Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, and using spherical trigonometry, it figures out to 8 inches of curvature per mile squared. A mile is squared, so for 2 miles, it would be 2 times 2, 4 times 8 inches, 32 inches. And for the third mile, it's 3 squared, which is 3 times 3, 9 times 8 is 72. So you're going 8, 32, 72, 128 inches, and so on. And this is the kind of curvature that would exist on a ball, and specifically on a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as they say it is. So you can check with theodolites and telescopes and different methods, lasers, to see if the Earth actually does have that curvature. And it's been tested over and over again and found to have no curvature whatsoever. So I mean, even if they had the number wrong and it was 100,000 miles in circumference, there would still be a calculable, measurable curvature that just isn't there.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
The only place curvature exists is in NASA photos and videos, and those can be proven to be CGI fakes, and the early ones were literally taken through a round window to make the Earth appear round.
An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr., and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th, and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission, when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit.
And that's it. It's just photo trickery and brainwashing that's got the world thinking that we're on a ball spinning around the sun with a magical force called gravity holding us on the underside of this spinning ball. It's all just brainwashing that we've received. It's pseudoscience accepted as legit science. But real science has confirmed geocentricity in the flat Earth for thousands of years. The flat Earth was known to ancient cultures all over the world for thousands of years, and it's actually a relatively recent phenomenon that people have been believing we're on a big ball spinning around the sun. Pythagoras first came up with it about 2,500 years ago. He's also often considered the first Freemason, and it didn't go anywhere much from there until 2,000 years later. Copernicus picked up where he left off, another Jesuit Freemason, and he really picked things up, and Kepler and Galileo and Newton, and now Einstein and NASA, Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, all these people, they're all part of this Freemasonic club that is building a pseudo-scientific worldview to indoctrinate the slave class so that we can be propagandized into doing anything. This is basically the biggest thing you could possibly lie about. So the psychopaths who control society are interested in world domination. The best way to brainwash the whole world is to lie to the whole world about what the world is. What is the earth under your feet? What is in the sky above your head? Where did we come from? You know, it's now, this lie has now evolved into a Big Bang evolution, heliocentric spinning ball cosmology, when in reality, we're not a cosmic accidental sneeze, nothingness turned everything. This is quite obviously intelligently designed, this thing we're experiencing here, this life, this universe. I can't believe anyone in their right mind can look me in the eyes with a straight face and say, no man, it's all random. This is all just random. But people do.
Yeah, right. I think you make a lot of great points, man, and I think the curvature argument is pretty damn strong. And I pulled this off your website in the comments section because, to your credit, you spend a lot of time writing thorough answers to questions and responses to critics, and that's where a lot of my questions got answered. And so here's a little more detail about the curvature argument from your site. It seems like lighthouses are one great example. This first one you have is the Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England. It's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? And then you have several other good examples in the lighthouse department, but another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon. These examples seem hard to rectify unless there's some obvious answer that I'm missing, but I would say this is a pretty compelling thread of evidence, my man.
Yeah, the distance at which the light from lighthouses can be seen at sea is just way too far for the Earth to be a ball 25,000 miles in circumference. Another great example is the Notre Dame Antwerp spire, standing 403 feet high from the foot of the tower, with Strasbourg measuring 468 feet above sea level. And so with the aid of a telescope, ships can be seen on the horizon, and captains declare they can see the spire from an amazing 150 miles away. If the Earth were a globe, however, at that distance, the spire should be an entire mile, 5,280 feet below the horizon. So there's a lot of examples like this where you've got a whole mile, say, that the light should be below the horizon. You should not be able to see it. And even light refraction that the naysayers try to bring up can't account for it, as it can only account for 1/12 of whatever the original distance is. So, the light at which lighthouses can be seen at sea, as well as the fact that canals, tunnels, and railroads are never built with curvature in mind whatsoever. That's not necessary. And if there were, then their plans would be off, in fact. I've got quotes in my book from railroad engineers and canal builders saying how it's hard enough for railroads to make curves horizontally, let alone if we were on a ball, and railroads would have to be curving up on the ball, and they give examples of different railroads over the Earth and how long they are, and how much curvature they'd have to be ascending, and how it would be so impossible for the trains to be able to go up this curve, because trains are made to be on a level. They just can't operate that way. So there's a lot of proofs like that.
You mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson, and one compelling thing you have in your documentary is Neil deGrasse Tyson is on TV and he's talking about the shape of the Earth, and he's talking about how they just discovered now that the Earth is more pear-shaped than it is round.
So Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning, and it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate, and officially